Hello, Internet, and welcome to another Wednesday's Serial. This week I'm going to take a look at not only what I've read, but I kind of have a few thoughts roll, and I kind of want to go through that because that's more where my head's at than just talking straight about books. But let's start with the books, because what better place to start? DC was kind of my main focus this week. Just turns out that's the way the cookie crumbled. Secret 6 this has been a lot harder for me to get into because of the cast and crew, but as it says on the cover, we're seeing the Riddler kind of throw down with all the characters, and we get this kind of final fight for what is the arc. And well, I think that's interesting. It's also a bit of a bizarre thing to come back to because I feel like that's not where the comics started. We started with this real like mystery and what's bringing these people together, and for it to just be him looking for a diamond because any one of these characters could have been trying to make the mark. I there's kind of a disconnect of tone there, and I don't know. We get a lot of Catman in this issue, and a bit of the not ventriloquist, the dummy, but we don't see a whole lot more of other characters. They're there, but they're not as important, and it feels a little. It feels a little like we should be getting a little more out of this, and with it being the Riddler, like who's the mystery, who's setting up the puzzle, it being the Riddler, it feels so on the nose. That in and of itself is kind of a letdown, whereas if it was made to be any other character, it might have felt more organic and would have made this issue, the fight with whoever it was, more interesting, give some tie as to these characters. Maybe if every the character like was set up to have a light connection to whoever, it could have easily been set up to make the team a little stronger to move forward. But the way things are going, who knows if this book is going to last? Oof. That's coming off of me hearing that right after I post my video on Omega Men, that book is apparently canceled. It's getting harder and harder for me to get into books when I'm reading less and less, and even what I'm trying to read is getting cut down. Black Canary 4 is interesting because as opposed to the 6 issue arc, this really feels like the last issue of the initial arc. This comic being Your Lost Little Girl, and Ditto was kidnapped, and we see where she's going. But in the process of doing so, we get a kind of connection to the DC universe through this book that's kind of felt off on its own, which is interesting. But we also get a setup for a villain to Black Canary to kind of give her a nemesis. But in doing so, it rolls in the rock and roll thing and all that, and you just have this moment where I don't know. Maybe other people won't be feeling this way, but the setup is around this rock and roll career, and the villainess actually really wanted to be really pure and stick to the art of what she was doing. She wanted to do something really cool, and she spent her whole life dealing with obstacles and dealing with this, and dealing with this being trying to build up her career and get to a position where she could do what she wanted to do, make rock and roll. And when you see what happens with Dinah and how that's involved, honestly, when you think of this like if this was an independent comic, I swear the roles would be reversed. But because this is a DC comic, in a weird way, Dinah being the hero makes more sense because it's like kind of the corporate whatever, and the right person for the job wins out even if they're not the right person for the job in a certain way. It's really interesting, and with this being a DC comic, I can't help but like assign all this meaning to it, and it's a really interesting comic for that. Um, and that's going to play when I talk a little later, but the whole corporate idea and how I'm feeling about corporate comics versus not so corporate comics has really been coming to a head lately with the post New 52 and WB reacting more and more to Disney's Marvel. And this comic encapsulated in such a weird way, but it was weird reading it from the other end and seeing the villain in the DC comic, me going, look, in it, that's a weird thing for me too, because Black Canary is the one character at DC that I have the most connection to, the one I've read the longest, and to kind of be like, F that is such a weird new place to be in, and it's kind of rocky and interesting enough that I'm totally hooked on the comic now, just in a way I've never been before. So now I almost want to see more of the villain than the hero, which is, in a way, always kind of fun. Constantine for strongest issue yet. The art's definitely a little better. But we're seeing John being a rat bastard, and we're getting a playback to his rock and roll days. Kind of weird, but all right. Yeah, man. I don't know. I want to try to have some better thoughts about this comic, but what it comes down to is this was a really solid issue of Constantine that was playing on stuff and just setting us up for the next story. It was just freaking well done, which was just kind of nice to read. Also, with all the rock and roll going on, if any of you guys have recommendations of rock that's come out in, I'm just going to say, like, the past 5 years or something, let me know, because I'm so fucking out of it. Radio is useless. I don't even know how you find music anymore, so yeah, man. Shudder 15. Guys, if you got off this book, get back on. So the story's weird, but this comic, like pretty much any comic, can really break it down, is about the moments. And there's a moment here where they're trying to do kind of a drug sort of deal, and they deal with an out-of-body experience in a way with comics that only works with comics in such a apt way. I don't know how to describe it. Didn't hit me as too amazing until I just kind of stopped on the page for a second and kind of absorbed what was happening, kind of what was being said with the page. It was one of the most incredible pages I've looked at in comics for a while now. And man, I think if you're a fan of comics, this is something you need to pick up. Just this issue at the very least. This was something else. The only real disappointment was getting, frankly, ads in the back matter and not like a weird comic from some indie person that they've been propping up. That's been one of the best things about this, but I wasn't there this month. But man, I don't know what else I can say to try to push people this book, because I know it was too weird for some people at first or whatever, but I don't know, you guys read a lot of bad books. Read a good one. So then finally, without a doubt, pick of the week or whatever you want to say, this has to be at the top of pretty much everyone's list, right? Like, too hyped to not be, and maybe not the hottest week on the stands. Tokyo Ghost. I mean, this is one of those books you can just flip through because it's just so pretty. Like, this is freaking incredible. This is a tour de force of action pages, and it moves, and it's a crazy freaking comic. But I'm kind of excited to dive back into it again already, because on the back, and I just kind of want to talk about this, on the back, they have this kind of outro, I want to say, that Rick Remender wrote, and it was kind of about where kind of the inspiration of the idea of this came from, is the idea that, you know, we don't get through like a dinner or a meal without like popping and like stopping at our cell phones, and to him this is just a complete lack of self-control. And if we're that bad now and how fast technology advances, how it becomes part of our lives, like people being completely immersed in technology basically all the time, and with it kind of a lack of self-control, and where does that leave society? And you accelerate that to the future, and here we are with this. And with that, he wanted to kind of tell a love story, but there's kind of an interesting push and pull there, because it's this idea of being lost to the net, but also dealing with human connection in a very real way. And so, to me, that's interesting, because it's not just like, it's a love story, woo. It's kind of an idea of embracing humanity and what's there in front of you, versus kind of being lost, kind of virtual reality versus reality, but on a more emotional level than the way it's kind of normally tackled. But he's definitely citing some old sci-fi movie references and whatnot when he's talking about it. And man, it's just damn pretty to look at. I don't know. I'm really excited to see where this goes, but I'm also going to have to reread it to see if I can make sense of what the hell happened. So that's where we're at there. Then I wanted to talk about this puppy. This is Spawn, the Origins Collection, Volume 2. Not the Volume 2 is really important. I started reading Spawn. And I'm actually enjoying it a lot more than I would have thought I would have. I've read a lot of the first issues before, and I don't know, I really enjoyed it this time around. And I got to read issue 10, which I've never read before, which, if you don't know, there was kind of a rash fairly early on, starting with issue 8 or 9, where it's like Frank Miller, Dave Sims, Neil Gaiman. It's just this tour de force of creators coming in and contributing to Spawn, which led to a lot of lawsuits, but reading the comics are really interesting. And a lot of it swelled around this idea of anti-corporate, but with some hindsight, you see there's maybe some upswing to the corporate stuff in that respect, like a clear definition of rights and payment with a la Neil Gaiman, or being able to reprint things a la the Dave Sims issue, which issue 10 is the one I've had to buy separately because I don't think it's ever been reprinted, which is really sad, because issue 10, it takes place outside of the continuity basically entirely. And what it is you see Spawn walking through, but the boxes, the captions keep saying, not Spawn, not Spawn. And you see him, and you get to this really famous page. You've had to have seen it on some retrospective or something before, where there's all these familiar hands reaching through the bars. You see, like, Batman, Spider-Man, the Hulk, Ghost Rider, I think, Batman, like, rah, reaching out, and there's all these hooded bodies against the wall, male, but, and those are supposed to represent the creators, and they're hooded, and they're upset because they gave up the rights to their characters. So this is kind of like the punishment for both the creation and the creator, is this like corporate hell. And Spawn then moves on and gets to go home, because he was created and was free by his creator. Interesting. Also makes me wonder if Mark Miller has ever done Spawn, because he's been known to do his own creations and stuff now, and I'd be curious to see his take with Spawn then, and in light of all that, but I don't know. But it made me think about this whole corporate creation thing and whatnot. And, you know, when I'm reading the comics, I'm like, yeah, fuck it, because I've been really down on the big two lately, and it was interesting. I say that despite picking up 3 DC comics today, but that's the most I've picked up in a long time. And it's just, it's an interesting push and pull, and it's really interesting to, like, be capturing that energy and realizing this is from the early 90s. This isn't new. This sort of thing has been building for a while, but it's kind of interesting to me too, because back when DC might have been corporate, but it wasn't the same. And Marvel was Marvel, baby. Like, bankrupt shell corporations everywhere, but it was Marvel. and and so now it's just this like zenith of peaks. But on the other hand, Marvel and DC may not do it on the best schedule, but they do print their stuff. And I was looking ahead, and the Spawn collection that I'm collecting, the Origins trades, which are the furthest to go forward, stopped being collected at issue 122. Spawn is in 200 frickin' something. There's a few trades of random spots, and then with some holes past that. But if I want to read Spawn through, I can't in any legal fashion, in any reliable way. Like, I could try to track down all the issues, but at this point a lot of them are collector's items. I'm looking at a lot of $10 books. Because they were printed once, not printed again. They went to low print numbers because the readership declined. So they're expensive to find. Like I said, not reprinted really ever, so it's not even slightly harder to find trades. They just don't exist for large swaths of the run. And of course, those issues would be harder or easier to find if the trades are there, but any of the holes or parts where they're not collected again are obviously harder to find again in issues. There is digital, but that's $2 a pop per issue, which means you're looking at, $1,000 on digital comics, which is ridiculous. If these were being printed in trades through and through as far as it went, it would cost less than that for me to acquire. Which makes it even more bizarre, right? Which means either I suck it up and go digital legit, or I look for another method just to read the comic if I want to catch up. And that's a weird place to be, like, when the best viable option with, frankly, the best scans is illegal. What do you say to that? And I've been trying to ask if the print run was just halted or something for a while. Because what it was they were printing like 3 to 4 trades a year pretty regularly for a while. And then this year, they printed the 20th trade and stopped in February. Or well past February, and if they're going to be doing multiple ones a year, more would have come out by now. So that's kind of shitty. And what's even shittier about it is that this is Image. If you want The Walking Dead, if you want Savage Dragon, which seems more akin, or if you want Saga, or if you want Ghost, if you want any frickin' Image book, you go and you buy the trades. Like, but what do you do when they don't sell the trades? And I'm not bitching about timing. Like, if I had to be a little patient, that's one thing. But if they're not coming out, they're not coming out. So, I don't know. It's a really weird thing to be. And it kind of made me reevaluate that corporate thing. And I'm like, well, if you want to read it, usually they're pretty good about getting the stuff out. There are exceptions to that, no question. I've run into that time and time again. Thinking of it, it took them forever to come out with Deadpool trades. When they did, it was expensive. And then Gotham City Sirens Volume 2 was oddly low print. There's just a whole bunch of that. So, weirdo stuff. But, yeah. The other thing I've been thinking about is, you might have noticed, I've been talking, and you've just been looking at my ugly mug if you've been looking at this. I imagine most of you, if you watch my videos, don't watch my videos, you listen. I mean, you're missing out on this gorgeous mug, but once you've seen it, you know. It can be in your imagination, whenever you need it. But I've been thinking, like, podcasting in a way makes more sense. The only person I know who really does it in the community is Longbox Reviews, but then if you do podcasting, you're not in this community. There's, a lot of cool people here. I like you guys. I like people who bother to listen to me. Crazy. But I was thinking podcasting would be cool, but at the same token, who podcasts alone? I don't know if anyone else has been thinking about looking at, because I've been trying to look for good comic podcasts, and I only know of one. And I've been taking suggestions and trying to listen, and I have a reason to dislike everyone I've turned on, and I've tried to give them a fair shot, but yeah. So if you know of any good comic podcasts beyond iFanboy, let me know. I'd be curious to know. And if you've been looking at podcasts and, tell me about it. I'm just curious. So, yeah. See y'all soon with another comic review.